Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Welcome to another episode in our debut Spotlight series where we shine a light on the freshest authors and their work. Today, that spotlight is on Amman Brar and his debut novel, Mr Sidhu's Post Office, which is out now, and if you haven't got your copy, you can find a link to order one in the show notes. Amman Brar is a writer and theatre maker. He has an MA in creative writing from the University of East Anglia. He's written for BBC Radio 4, The Lost City, and had a short film, No More Pound Shop Wars, produced by BBC and slung low. In 2016, his play Punjabi Girl was produced at Rich Mix, and in 2017, his play The Radicalisation of Versing about Indian soldiers in World War I was produced by Tamasha Theatre Company and National Archives Kew. It was performed at the Home Office and subsequently made into an audio recording. Amman was one of the inaugural winners of the BBC Writers' Room 10 Award, and today he joins me to discuss his debut novel, Mr Sidhu's Post Office. Welcome, Amman, to A Pair of Bookends.
Hello, good morning, Hannah. How are you?
Good morning. I am well. I think we are both just about surviving this heat wave.
Yes, yeah. Look, I'm just going to turn my fan on. If you don't mind, I turned it off and it was boiling.
It's unbearable.
Yeah. So, but if it's noisy, let me know. It's fine.
Hopefully we make it through.
We won't melt by the end of the interview. But if we do, it'll be for other reasons. Yeah.
But to start off with, I love to start by asking what you're currently reading. So could you tell us?
I've got it here actually. I'm currently reading This Is Where the Serpent Lives by Daniel Moinidin.
I've heard great things about this.
It just came out recently, maybe a few months ago or so, and I'm really enjoying it. It's all set in Pakistan over the last sort of 50 years or so post-partition. And it's based around these big families of kind of feudal landlords. And the story comes at it from these kind of, less well-off people trying to make good in this feudal atmosphere. And it's really good. It's really gripping. And it's sort of three novellas, but they're all linked. So it's quite interesting format there. The authors made it into. I'm loving it. I'm near the end, and it's very gripping.
It sounds great. I mean, I love anything about like big families. But this, did you say it's set in Pakistan?
Yes. Yeah.
It sounds a bit like Succession, but in Pakistan.
I mean, it's very much like it's more like someone outside the family is trying to come in and make good. And they're more kind of people who are disenfranchised from the mainstream of money and power, and they ingratiate themselves to these big families, try and make good, and they're obviously intelligent and everything, but the feudal system and the powers that be really can you can feel it sort of crushing the small man unless you're in with the big families. Recommend it. Really good.
That sounds brilliant. I'm sold. It's going on my TBR. That. For the listeners, let's get into Mr Sidhu's Post Office. Could you tell them what it's all about?
Yeah, so I mean, Mr Sidhu's Post Office is about Mr Sidhu, who runs his post office in Richmond in southwest London. And he's a widower with two grown-up kids. He still loves his wife, even though she's passed away. And he made a promise to her that he'd settle his two kids, his son Raju and his daughter Meenu, while he was alive, and honour that. But in the meantime, he's running a post office, and he's got a lovely woman, Rose, who helps him out in the shop. And without him wanting to, meaning to, he's kind of falling in love with her. And he's someone who had an arranged marriage in India when he was young. And now, as a sort of widower with responsibilities, thinking that part of his life is over, he's negotiating these new feelings for Rose. And at the same time, he's running a post office. There's money going missing from the post office. There's things that aren't adding up in the accounts. He's completely doesn't understand what's going on. And all of these things conspire together to make his life difficult. Mm-hmm. And we follow him through all these adventures, as seeing, will he succeed? Will his love succeed? And will he settle his kids?
I would love for us to start by talking about Mr. Sidhu because I think he is such a gorgeous, memorable character, and he is this big-hearted, community-led man. And he really cares about, Rose says it multiple times. He really cares, and not only cares about his community, but he really cares about his children. He still cares deeply about his wife. He cares deeply about Rose. He's just such a lovely person. And as you've said, he becomes sort of wrongfully embroiled in this scandal, which we will come to.
Yeah,
And I believe that he is loosely based on your own father. I
yeah.
wondered if you could tell us a bit about creating him and sort of what aspects of your father inspired his character.
Yeah, sure. My father, he worked for 20 years in the post office in Richmond. So, and me and my two sisters and my mum, we were all working there, especially me at weekends and after school. So it's a world I know so well. So as a writer already, I was like, I haven't read about post offices and,
Yeah.
that kind of, hub of the community. And when my father passed away 8 years ago, I really wanted to kind of capture something about that world, especially because he loved it. He loved working as a sub postmaster, and back then it was really kind of a revered thing to be a sort of sub postmaster. It was like government business. You're, an extension of the government. You're selling stamps, dealing with pensions. You had the whole community coming over, around. People just come in and gossip for about a couple of hours. Not even with you, just with other people they'd met, who they knew in the area. And so when I came to create Mr. Sidhu, a lot of it was, my father, and it was also an amalgamation of my father and those men, especially the men who came over of that generation in the 60s and 70s, who came as young men to make a life for themselves and who had principles and they had values. And, my father instilled those values in us as a family. And, he wasn't particularly religious or anything. These are just values he had from his father and from his village. And this is the way you deal with people. And this is how you should be in the world. And I really wanted to bring that across. So Mr. Sidhu's that, he's bits of my father, bits of that generation of men who came over. And it came from that, really. When you create characters, you're trying to create a character who's going to go on a journey with you.
Yeah.
As a writer, as a reader, you want to create someone who's got flaws, but who's also got things you care about. And I grew up with a lot of men who really cared. They really cared about their community. They really cared about their families, and they didn't have their fathers there with them. They were kind of on their own in England and kind of half remembering, half trying to do right by the values they were taught, and at the same time dealing with the world as it was, which wasn't always friendly. But I have to say, for in our experience as a family, when my father ran a post office in Richmond, we were welcomed, and we were really part of the local community. And even now, I'll walk and if I bump into one of the old customers, they're like, "Oh, we loved it when your dad was here. It was such a lovely time." And so I wanted to give some of that, out in this book and through Mr. Sidhu. Yes.
That's so lovely. And you really do see through this book how you see the importance of community through the eyes of Mr. Sidhu. And
Yeah.
would you say that's something that you learned from your own father?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I grew up in a very Punjabi community in Hounslow in West London, and as a kid, there were just Punjabis everywhere, and I really kind of thought, the rest of the England was full of Punjabis. It was only as I got older, and especially when we got the post office, you think, there's another world out there, because when you're little, the world is small, and so that thing of community was very much. I think it's just, if you run a post office, you just become the center of a community.
Yeah.
That's how it used to be, I think. It's less and less so now, because post offices are run differently. The internet has changed how people interact with getting pensions and online banking and everything like that. So those kind of hubs don't really exist anymore. But I think when my father worked for a post office the post office before he owned his own. And I think for my father and a lot of his friends who did the same as he did, working for the post office was a really prestigious thing. It was government business. It felt very like, oh, I've come here and I've made it because I'm part of the sort of system.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why it was important to tell that story about the post office as well and the scandal that's happened, because it meant, and women and people who worked for the post office were so invested in the idea of what it meant to be working for the post office.
Yeah, it's such a, I mean, I was filled with dread when, you start reading about the money going missing. And I think that, I mean, maybe a lot of people know or have awareness around the scandal already. I didn't have much knowledge on it until I watched Mr. Bates versus the Post Office.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that really sort of catapulted it into the sort of mainstream conversation.
yeah,
And I mean, that series like haunted me. I was so upset watching it and couldn't believe how many, innocent, good people were sort of caught up in this. And as soon as I, started reading in this book, when the money starts going missing and you see his confusion and he's staying there until, midnight to count and recount and check what's going on, you really feel for him because you think he loves this job and he loves, serving his community and being this community hub. And then this starts
yeah,
to happen and it kind of unravels his sort of livelihood, I guess. I wondered if you could tell the listeners,
yeah,
for anyone unfamiliar with the
yeah,
Horizon scandal, what it is and when did
yeah.
you first sort of learn about it?
Yeah, so the Horizon scandal is basically what post offices used to be all offline. You'd come in with your pension book, you give your pension book to the postmaster, he'd stamp it, he'd keep a little docket from it, and and then you'd pay out the money that you said on the docket. Once, obviously, with the internet and things started to become more online, there were computer systems put into place, and Horizon was the main one that the post office used to run some post offices to make them online. And with any computer system, there's bugs. And it was Fujitsu, a Japanese computer system, who were given the job of doing this. From the get-go, there were problems. And for some reason, the post office had a line, which was that there is nothing wrong with this computer system. There can be nothing wrong with it. It's infallible. And so, therefore, if there's anything wrong, it's the postmaster's fault. And the sub postmasters had these very old kind of contracts with the post office, which basically said, if there's any money missing, you are liable. So, which was, back in the day when you had money in a safe, and the people came in for their gyros or their pension books. It was very easy to see where the money was. But as soon as it went online and money goes missing on for computer screen, it's not physical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what starts to happen. And of course, it was, now we all know it was the computer system that was faulty. But at the time, it was a new computer system. People who had never used computers were having to use it, didn't know what was wrong, and their contract said they were liable for any money missing. And the post office pursued them for that. And we know now, even though they knew that the computer system was faulty and that there could be discrepancies that were not the fault of postmasters, they went after them. They took them to court. They put them in jail. They bankrupted people. And for me, when I was telling this story and what I learned from having done my research, there's a great journalist, Nick Wallace, who's been documenting, and he wrote a great book called The Great Post Office Scandal, and he's interviewed all the sub postmasters that were involved in this. And during the inquiry led by Sir Win Williams, the public inquiry, there were human impact statements. And, sub postmaster after sub postmaster went on and talked about how their lives had been ruined, how they had not been believed, how they had been made to feel like an outcast in their own community. And as we were talking before about how sub postmasters were so entrenched in their community as a hub, as a place of trust, and then suddenly to be tarred by being called a thief, being, two-faced and, being scandalized by this was awful. And I wanted to tell a story of someone trying to get on with their lives. Yeah. Just a normal person who happens to be a sub postmaster trying to, before the scandal, people had lives.
Yeah.
And they had the pressures of a normal life of falling in love, in and out of love, being married, running a business. They had all these things. And then suddenly this thing comes along, which paints them in a terrible light, creates rifts in families, creates rifts between them and the community they serve, and the mental anguish that put people under. I really wanted to make that part of the story.
Yeah, it's really haunting, especially not even especially like it's just happening to ordinary good people. Like I said,
Yeah.
like it's awful. And the fact that they, use that line of they keep saying in the book, don't they? Like this isn't happening to anybody else. Or like the
Yes.
fact that
Yeah.
they lie about that, it's infuriating because
Yeah.
you think that this is happening to other people. Why are
Yeah.
you not investigating that? Surely that's an important thing. And, especially, I've forgotten now, is it Alan? The
Yes,
man
Alan.
that, what's
Yeah.
his role? I've forgotten what
He,
his role
he
is.
he's an area manager, so he looks after a load of sub postmasters in the area, and he's like the local area manager.
And he
Uh,
knows that Mr. Sidhu is a good man. And he says,
yeah,
like, we've never had any issues with you. So I know, I know you're a good person. So just pay back the money and we can forget about this. And it's like, well, if you
yeah,
know he's a good person and this has never happened, why are you trusting,
yeah,
trusting
yeah.
that he's wrong?
Exactly. I mean, even the union which was meant to be serving sub postmasters was very much backing the post office. So even the unions who were meant to be helping sub postmasters were saying no. If they say it's wrong, it's wrong. And it was kind of like a collective, not a conspiracy because we don't know that, but there was just a collective denial that the sub postmasters could be right.
Yeah.
And it was just a line that there could be nothing wrong with this computer system. And they had to go all the way to the High Court to get that disproved, which they did in the end, which is
It
wonderful.
makes me so angry. I can't tell you.
I mean, and I just say, when I was writing this, I listened to a lot of stories and read a lot of stories in newspapers about the scandal, and there was Panorama, Radio 4, and they were just very bits, and they'd focus on one person, they'd focus on another one, and there was no joint up thing, and it was funny because not funny, but the way the world works. I put my book into publishers and I put it in, and as I put it in, the ITV drama came out, and that was amazing because suddenly everyone saw the joined upness of what was happening with this scandal. So rather than it just being one story here, one story there, what the ITV drama did so well was create a coherent story about, no, this is happening across the country. This is not one person. It's loads of people.
Yeah.
And it was very much to banish and break that idea that this is not happening to anyone else. And that's what the ITV drama did so well. And especially highlight Alan Bates, who's just a hero, an amazing man.
Absolutely. I think it's such an incredible series. And if anybody that's listening hasn't watched it, I would highly recommend you go and do that because, as Aman's just said, you see it from a variety of perspectives, and it's important to know, how these people were sort of mistreated and how many people this happened to. It's mind-blowing. I just want to say as well, I just remembered I loved this small detail in his character, that whenever he refers to a place, he thinks of it in terms of the postcode.
Yeah, I don't know where that came. I remember, I think my dad would just have this amazing capacity, and obviously he did because he worked in the post office for so many years, that he would if he'd talk about Newcastle or something, go, and whatever, and he'll go, that's the post. He just knew the postcode to loads of places. So when it came to writing and when places were named, I thought, in his head, of course, he'd be going, that's the postcode for that place. So it felt right to put it in.
Yeah. No, it's such a nice character detail. I loved it. I want to get into his backstory a little bit, Mr. Sidhu's backstory.
Yeah.
And I should say, I'm trying to think of the ways he's referred to in the book so that the listeners are familiar with who we're referring to. So his name is Sukhdev, is that how I pronounce it? Sukhdev. And he's also referred to as David or Dave, but I think for the purpose of this, we'll refer to him as either Mr. Sidhu or Sukhdev.
Yeah.
But he is in his 60s, I think, in this book. And we do return to his childhood childhood. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about why he might be keen to sort of leave that part of his life behind and what his kind of childhood was like.
Yes, so Mr. Sidhu, he grew up in India, in a very rural area of northern India, Punjab, and that kind of life was nothing changed. Everything stayed the same. The land gave, and farmers reaped the harvest, and that had been going on there for millennia. Now, Mr. Sidhu comes along, and his father and we know this in the story, his father had a daughter with his first wife, and his first wife died in childbirth, and he was told to marry again by his village because they said, who's going to protect you? You've only got a daughter. So you can already tell it's a very masculine, kind of patriarchal kind of atmosphere he's grown up in, where if you have land, if you haven't got any sons, who's going to defend you? People will take your land. It's like that kind of cut and thrust of life. So when Mr. Sidhu's born, he's born from the second marriage of his father, and he's born and he's skinny, and his brothers are big, and their brothers will go and work on the farm, and the village elders look at Sukhdev as a boy and say, he's too skinny, he's going to be rubbish on the farm, send him to school, because he'll, and for most boys growing up then, they want to work on the farm. They want to prove themselves as men. And now Mr. Sidhu goes to school and thrives. He loves it. It's just it opens his mind. It opens his worldview. He reads books. He loves maths. It just changes how he sees himself, how he sees his farm. And he has a good friend, Darshan, who also has planned when they're young to get to England to kind of become more than they are. And so that's the background really of Mr. Sidhu. He, by a sort of accident of his stature, of not being a big, strong man, he's sent to school. And that's how he becomes more than he ever thought he would be, by coming to England and becoming part of a very English community and being sub postmaster. And that's why, working for a government institution like the post office means so much to him, because he's gone further than any of his family had.
Yeah, it's really sad. He's described as he's described as the runt, isn't he, as a child, and
Yeah.
his brother, I think he's got multiple brothers, hasn't he? Has he got two
Yeah,
brothers?
two brothers. Yeah,
But one of them in particular is really cruel to him.
yeah,
And his mother doesn't, really acknowledge him.
yeah,
And it's only really, his father that sort of looks out for him. I
yeah.
wondered how you feel Sukhdev's upbringing impacts the way he parents his own children.
Yeah, I like I said, he comes from that rural feudal, instant. This is why I love that book I'm reading at the moment, where the serpent lives. It's kind of in that sort of part of the world. But he comes from a very rural farming background, where it's about the men go to the fields, the women keep the house and make sure the house is good, and the roles they play in terms of men and women are very defined. And so he comes to England, where it's much more liberal. There's much more fluidity between genders in terms of roles and working. And he navigates that quite well. But when it comes to his own son and his daughter, he very much sees his son as someone, his son's the boy and he's going to carry on the family line. And his daughter is someone who will marry another family and be part of their family, because that's just the way he grew up. And that's as much as he knows. And, reader will see whether he how he deals with that, and whether he changes his mind. You'll see that, whether he does that in the book.
I mean, there's parts of his culture from Punjab that he sort of
Yeah,
brings with him. But in terms of like the values, him and his wife, they have tried to be a bit more like modern or progressive. I
yeah,
don't really know how you
yeah,
describe it, but yeah, they
yeah.
do try to be a bit more modern in terms of their expectations of their children, which I found really amusing, because he's kind of always having this sort of tug of war and having, people from his community sort of visit him and tell him how he should be acting. And he's like, no, like, this is what we decided. Can you just let us live?
Yeah. I mean, that my parents are very, very liberal and very progressive like that, and I wanted to show that part of like the struggle is not only your own families, but how you're seen by other families, because it's very much a community thing. and then you have to sort of defend yourself in ways that you never had to explain this, but you just, I think for Mr Sidhu and his wife, they knew this was very important that their kids get on and become part of the fabric of the UK. They're not going to kind of go, right, we do things this way and that's the way it's going to be. They kind of want to embrace what the modernity is. However, there are certain principles and certain values that they adhere to, which is, I've got to make sure my children are settled. I've got to make sure they've got enough financially. They're constant anxiety about whether they're going to have enough. Have they got enough? Will my son stop having dreams of being an actor and and get a real job? And I think that's any parent, not just Indian.
As you can imagine, I loved that aspect. So I really felt for his son.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not easy for any
fun.
parent having an actor as a child, because they're just kind of thinking, what are you doing? Like, I come from a family that are not creatives. Yeah, they might be creative minded in their own way, but they don't pursue it as a career. And I'm the first one in my family to go into the arts, and they're all kind of like, what are you doing? What is going on? You're not secure in this.
Yeah, well, just to give some context to the readers, like Raju, the Mr Sidhu's son, who he's totally concerned with all the time, worries about, because he's an actor, and and at the same time he will make sure that Raju has a property, and make sure he's not kind of wasting his life too much, and constantly hoping he'll just give up that dream and get a normal job. And I'm with you on that one. I'm the first one in my family to sort of pursue a kind of creative career, and there's always anxiety for parents when your kids do that, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with that, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I bet. And I really loved, I'm not going to spoil it, but I really loved Raju's sort of ending to the story. I loved where he ended up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good.
I really enjoyed that. I also just want to say, just going back to Punjab, I was really surprised reading this, and I don't know if this is my ignorance, but I was really surprised at their use of, this is such a random thing to be to fixate on, but their use of dried buffalo manure. I don't know why I was so surprised by that. I just didn't expect it. So they use it to cook with.
Yeah. I mean, like,
blew my mind.
I mean, they see if you go to India, any rural villages, you'll see buffalo sort of, cow pat you'd have the equivalent in England, but buffalo poo, and you get it and you just smack it on the wall and it sticks to the wall and it will dry, and it's full of straw and sort of mud, and it just makes a great little thing to burn for a fire. And I grew up, when I used to go to India and I saw that, I was like, wow, that's mad. And of course, they've all got gas now. But if you go a bit rural, you'll still see people doing that,
No,
and
it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's free, and it's like you're not like chopping wood down or anything. Obviously, you've got to feed the buffalo, but it's very much a thing in
It's
India.
incredibly resourcul.
Yeah.
No, I don't know why I fixated on that, but I read it a couple of times and I was like, this is wild. Like, but obviously, that happens if you forget that other places in the world are making use of the land, and using different things that we have things that they might not. So yeah, they're just making use of things, and fair play to them. I was just a bit mind blown by it.
A place like India, what you think is like the landscape, the land, the temperature, everything's so different.
Yes.
And in England, it's not today, of course, but generally, it's a colder climate.
Yeah.
So you need brick houses, you need your roofs and all that. In India, I remember when I was very young, houses were made out of mud and straw, and it was fine. And then you just top it up with a bit more mud when the rainy season's on, and that'll dry out and it'll give an extra layer. And now we've come around to the idea, that's quite good. That's less use of resources, and it's biodegradable. It's not doing any harm to the environment. So I wanted to bring that in. I wanted to show that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can tell I fixated on it, so I enjoyed that aspect. It was fascinating. On the subject of them using that for cooking, food is something that crops up again and again in this book, and I really enjoy food food writing. And I especially loved Mr. Sidhu's frustration when he goes into what he believes is an Indian restaurant and he ends up disappointed by the lack of spice and authenticity. I wondered if you could tell us a bit about why food is so meaningful to him and a bit about that moment.
Food is meaningful to, I grew up with a Punjabi family. Food is everything. Food is love.
Yeah.
It's the way, my mum shows love like through her cooking. She still makes the best lamb curry I've ever tasted. And when we got together, family is all about food. And and you just wouldn't cook food badly. It just doesn't make any sense to even say that phrase. And I wanted to show, because I've been traveled to the UK a lot, and I'm always like seeking out a bit of spicy food, especially when I used to work in theatre. You end up in these little towns and try and find a curry, and quite often I'll be like, oh my days, this is not curry, this is just excuse my language, a bastardization of something. But this is not a curry. And I knew, my father and his mate, they would go to a place like, where I go, in Hounslow, near where I live. And there's restaurants there, and they look like canteens. There's metal tables. Not much furnishings and everything, but they make the best curries, and and it's just Asians in there generally, and they're all there because the food's good. That's it. They don't want anything else. They don't need it to look plush or anything.
Yeah.
And I will really want to show that that food cooked well is wonderful, and when it's not, it's no good. And it's upsetting. It's deeply upsetting to have your expectation of food be undermined, and suddenly and when he's with Rose, she's like, oh, it's quite nice, I quite enjoy it, and he's like, no, this is not real food, this is not Indian food, and he gets quite upset about it.
And understandably so. I mean, I come from a white British family, and not to generalize, but I can't say they're the best with seasoning, so and now I'm with someone that has a mixture of African and Iranian heritage. So there's a lot of great food, and he
Sounds
cooks
great.
every evening. So it's completely different to the food that I grew up on. But yeah, you don't need the sort of fluff sometimes that you see. The restaurant that he went to in the book, they have all this gorgeous decoration, but what does that mean if the food isn't great?
I mean, to be fair, like the restaurants in Suffolk, in East Anglia, in Southwold, so its core customer base is going to be English and holiday makers. And I wanted to show that, and it's a completely made up
spice.
They're catering to their audience, and that's fine. But if Mr. Sidhu comes along, he's not going to like that, and he doesn't know.
Fair enough. Can we talk about the romance in this book? We have Rose, and Rose works in the shop that's part of the post office that Mr. Sidhu owns. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about creating this storyline and wanting to have some romance for Mr. Sidhu.
Yeah, whenever I'm creating a main character who we're going to go on a long journey on, then this is my debut novel, but I've written plays before, and it's a similar thing of creating character that has potential to go on a journey. And I love to put my characters in difficult situations to make it uncomfortable for them to see what they do. And for me, Mr. Sidhu being a widower was something early on I wanted to have that in. And actually the story really did begin with Mr. Sidhu and Rose having feelings for each other. And I thought, this is going to be fun, because I knew Mr. Sidhu was going to be of my father's generation, of that generation, who are just sort of quite straight people who kind of work hard and are men and do things in their own way. And suddenly his heart's fluttering, he's going red when he talks to Rose. And so that was the initial spark for this novel, was the romance between these two. And one of the first lines that came to me was which has remained in it, which doesn't always happen, and it was the way she said his name. It was the way she said it, David. And because it just resonated to him in a completely new way. Of his wife would call him Sukhdev, and that was part of his Punjabi background. But when Rose called him David, it was something very new to him. And so, yeah, I wanted to, create a lovely romance, but make it hard for Mr. Sidhu because he's not used to this. He's not used to, you know, flirting or being romantic or dealing with his own feelings in that way.
Yeah.
And then Rose was very much a character who was sort of wrought out of a lot of women, working class English women who lived in Richmond then, less so now. It's very middle class now. But because there used to be a brewery in Richmond, there used to be a lot of like river boating works and things, and there'd be factories there which are no longer here. So there'd be a lot of working class women, and they're very strong community people. And my dad used to employ quite a few in the shop part of the post office. So, and I really wanted to give voice to those women who were just stalwarts in their communities. No nonsense women. You don't mess with them at all. So that was how that kind of romance started. Was Miss Sidhu, and he just having feelings for Rose, and then seeing how that panned out and just having fun with it. I enjoyed writing that.
Yeah, and I think he does learn a lot, doesn't he, from Rose and especially from her son Jay as well.
Yeah.
They obviously live in a different way to him, especially her son Jay. What interested you in what Jay sort of teaches Mr. Sidhu?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love Jay the character. I just had fun writing him. He's like I don't think it doesn't give anything away to say Rose had a child when she was quite young, and she gave him away for adoption, and then he's come back into her life, and I'd say he's a good spirit.
Yeah.
He's someone who's quite calm, quite relaxed, despite all the challenges he's had in his life. And there's various aspects to him that are sort of strange to Mr. Sidhu. And to most people, actually, things like Jay likes to sleep outside. He doesn't like sleeping inside, which he's just completely doesn't understand. And I think it was great for Mr. Sidhu to have a sort of, not a son, but like someone who's sort of could be his son, but wasn't, and have a relationship. Because with his own son, he's so anxious and so fraught about everything his own son doing. Having Jay there, and how easy Jay was and how independent he was. And Mr. Sidhu really likes that part of Jay, he doesn't, he runs his own, he's a tree surgeon, and he's sort of free and easy and independent. And I think Mr. Sidhu loves that, because I think he was like that when he was younger. He had to strive on his own and do his own thing. And I think that's what Mr. Sidhu really liked and chimes with him.
Yeah. I think he's really surprised by him as well, because there's a moment, and I'm not going to give anything away, but I don't know how to word it. He sort of asks Jay a question that might trigger, an ordinary person. It might trigger them. And I don't want to say ordinary, but like, the average person, it might trigger them, or they might, react in a way where they immediately get angry or upset. And Jay he just responds in a way that is so surprising and so calm. And I think, Mr. Sidhu is obviously, not anticipating that, but I just think Jay's a really great character, and I just really liked that, because I was expecting a different reaction. So to see that, I was like, oh, even I had my suspicions about him, and now I feel like I'm telling myself off and being like, why have you made these assumptions?
Yeah, I mean, Jay's just got a very nice spirit about him, and he interested in the world. And he's got this dog, Tubby, as well. Who Mr. Sidhu at the beginning of the book, he can't stand this dog. To him, animals dealt with. They're not meant to be in the home. And Jay's got this dog who follows him everywhere. And not a spoiler to say, by the end of the book, Mr. Sidhu loves Tubby, and
he does.
he does
love it. I could honestly chat to you about this book for much longer. I am very aware of time.
Sure.
Before I finish off and ask for your recommendation, I hope I can squeeze in one last question. And that is, of course, you've written lots for theatre, and I'm curious how writing for theatre has sort of fed your novel writing and maybe vice versa.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think theatres. When talk to people, I say, theatres. You do a lot of work behind the page. So when you get to the page, it's just dialogue and
Yeah.
screen. Stage directions generally. But you've done a lot of the work. So what you get there is the essence of something, of a character and the drama of that scene. But when you're writing a novel, you need drama for any story. So that's there. But with a novel, you're kind of with that person in their heads. And so this is Mr. Sidhu's written in a very close third person. So you're there with him, and it's all told through his point of view. So you're following him through the world, inside his head, understanding his thoughts, his reactions, sometimes not understanding them, but you're close with him. It's like you're a little camera, like a GoPro on top of his head, and going through his life, basically. And a play isn't that. Plays written for actors to be physically on stage.
Yeah.
And so I went through a lot of drafts. My agent is Nikki, amazing, and my editor Manpreet at Juniper. I overwrote. I just thought, oh, you write a novel. So you write everything they're doing, just like right, like, oh, description of this. Oh, I can do that. I can't do that on stage. And lots of editing, lots of cutting down, cutting down. Get to it's in whatever you write, you've got to get down to the essence of the story and give that to the audience, because anything else is fluff. And it's the same, but it's a different medium. It's prose. So I learned a lot, I have to say, like writing a novel. I learned a lot about the craft.
Yeah, I mean, I really admire you for that because I'm trying to write my debut and I have written
No,
bits for theatre, and moving from writing for theatre to writing a novel felt completely different to me. And
yeah.
I've had friends reading over it and they would be like, Hannah, you need to, friends that are writers, and they would be like, Hannah, you need to sort of expand on, like, you need to give more descriptions on like the world around them, tell us what this
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't just
Where
put
are
us in
they?
this room. Where are they? What's going on? What does this place look like? And I'm just more interested in like the dialogue.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
like, let me
yeah. I
just put
mean,
them
yeah,
in. Let me just
yeah,
let them have a
yeah.
conversation. And they're like, no, that's not how a novel works. So
No, no,
yeah, it's
no.
completely different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, very much. I'm sure you will get there. Just keep writing. It's all about that. Just keep going. And stage, they'll look out the window and see it's raining. In a novel, you have to tell the
Tell
reader it's
them. Yeah,
raining.
yeah. You do have to do a lot of telling, which, yeah, I need to keep
Yeah,
remembering. Finally, Amon, I would love to ask if you
yeah.
have a recommendation for the listeners. Is there anything that you've watched or read or listened to recently that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I recently read a book. It's going to have to be a book. It's a
Amazing.
I've got it here. I've got it here.
Great.
And it's a friend of mine wrote it, actually. It's called Jamaica Road by Lisa Smith. And
I've heard
it's,
about this. I think somebody
ah,
else recommended it yesterday.
so yeah. And there you go. Must be. It's a great London book. And it's set in the 80s, 70s, 80s, southeast London, and I loved it. There's like two characters, Connie and Daphne, and they're young kids growing up in southeast London, and I just, yeah, I was, and it's brilliant. It shows, it's written from the Black British perspective, and you just fall in love with these characters. It's beautiful. It shows them as they grow up through teenager and all the struggles and craziness that happens in the 80s in England. Definitely worth a read.
Amazing. You've given us some great recommendations today. Thank you so much.
It's all right.
And for the listeners, my recommendation to you is that you go and get yourselves a copy of Mr. Sidhu's Post Office. It is such a brilliant, heartwarming, wonderful story that's also very important. Of course, as we've said, it explores the Horizon scandal, but it also, shows us the importance of community, which I feel is especially important at the time that we're currently living through politically and socially. So everyone, go grab yourselves a copy. You will not regret it. And then come and talk to me about it so I can talk to more people. But lastly, thank you so much, Amman. I have loved this book and I have loved chatting to you all about it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on, Hannah. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And where can the listeners find you online, if anywhere?
Sure. So Instagram's probably the easiest. My handle is my name, Amman Brar. So yeah, come find me, say hi, and find out about Mr Sidhu.
Amazing. And if you enjoyed this episode, listeners, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on TikTok. For more content, we are also over on Patreon. Go give Amman a follow, go buy his book, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye.